Hello and welcome to Mr. Clark After Dark, everyone. My name is Lucas Clark and I am a certified educator with Alberta Education and the Alberta Teachers Association. All conversations and interactions exchanged is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. In no way does the content discussed intend to be in violation of the a.k.a. Code of Conduct or meant to target any individual student, teacher, or to belittle or demean the profession in any way. If you have something that you would like me to discuss or have a story of your own to share, please reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com. You can also send a direct message to me on Instagram at Mr. Clark After Dark. Hope you enjoy the show, and please do not forget to subscribe. And now, on to the show. Hope you all enjoy. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another wonderful episode, hopefully, of Mr. Clark After Dark. Today I have on the one and only Mr. Devon Powell, a.k.a. Shadow the DJ. Devon and I had a wonderful conversation. On part one here today, we discussed his kind of initial phasing into the profession, being in his first year here. We discussed how teaching is actually really 4 jobs in one, the unrealistic introduction that his practicum gave him, the major differences in teaching in Alberta versus Nova Scotia in his practicum, and kind of the different things that he's had to run in with this degree of standardization that we have here in the province, and how he's been able to handle it, or overcome it, I should say. How he became a DJ in university, the art of performing, spirituality outside of religion, anime and its nuance, growing up in Jamaica and how different education was in Jamaica versus how it is in Canada, what is actually meant by the word pedagogy and not just being a random buzzword that we all use in education, struggling with a new perception of self when moving to Canada when he started university and kind of overcoming his culture shock and identity struggle, which we go into a bit of depth, and obviously much more. Thank you all for tuning in, and really appreciate everyone supporting the show, and hope you enjoy. All right, Mr. Powell, how's it going, sir?
It's going good.
Yeah? How's the first couple months been for you?
If you want me to be honest, it's been a whirlwind of stress and the first year of teaching has been difficult, but we're getting there. Anything
unexpected so far of like what's causing that stress, or no?
And to be honest, everything has been unexpected. I think the question should be, what have I expected?
Because so what did you expect? I guess
I expected to go to work 8 a.m. to 3, have the rest of the evening off, chill. But actually it's been 24/7 learning, making sure I'm ready for class, prepping.
So how have you kind of adapted to that change in your life? Like, so one of the big things I think about a lot is, how has your free time changed?
My free time? In uni I worked a lot. Worked and went to school. So I didn't have much free time, but the use of my time has changed.
Okay.
Instead of doing multiple hobbies or multiple jobs, I'm now doing the same job that feels like 4 in one.
Okay. So why 4? Like what are the kind of different components that makes it feel like more than one job?
You have to be a presenter. You have to be a researcher. You have to graphic design with slideshows.
Yeah.
You have to be a writer. Make sure the wording of your questions are correct. There are just multiple facets that I didn't expect in the job.
Okay, so did you kind of iron some of that out in your practicums, or like how has the jump been from practicum to teaching? Especially in Nova Scotia, because you did your degree at St. FX.
Yeah.
Did your practicums in Nova Scotia with Mrs. Morgan's mom, which was a hilarious coincidence.
Yeah, that was
so how are the systems different? And like, what has been the change?
So the biggest difference has been the workload, because I feel like the education program tries to give you an introduction into the life of a teacher. Yeah. You start with one course, then you slowly build up to the full course load. But even so, it's only over a 5-week span, which is about a unit. Yeah. So you're not thinking about the entire year.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. So you're a bit more short term, because you almost always have an end goal.
Exactly.
in your practicum, but now even when you have an end goal, then now it's just the next semester.
Exactly.
You don't really have that, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a cycle rather than a straight line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I've been looking at it.
So has it been like discouraging at times?
In the beginning, yes,
Okay.
because when you can't see the end of a tunnel, it's hard to operate the train. But
Yeah.
I can see the end of the tunnel now that I have
Yeah.
a better understanding of what Alberta education is expecting with the curriculum. I didn't have that initial understanding, but now that I do, I can see.
So
where
what
the
is it
content
that
is
you
leading.
understand now that you didn't before? Do you think about like what the expectations are? Because I do see what you're saying in terms of the rigidity almost, but
So with the main difference I've seen is the way summative assessments are done here.
okay.
So without that training and understanding of, okay, so for this content, they need to be able to understand how to answer this question. Now that I know the questions, I'm able to backwards design almost.
Yeah, but it is weird that you design education with an answer in mind. That's like maybe that sounds a little bit too cliche or cheesy, but it's almost I always say to the students in grade 10, like we're in a 3-year preparation for your diploma now.
Yes, exactly.
So that it's almost liberating in a sense because you know what you're working for, but it's also very limiting because you're kind of anything that you kind of move outside of the curriculum, or maybe you want to like spice it up with like a new activity and it doesn't land. Well, then did I just waste a day of their time?
Yeah.
In preparing for this exam. That's a weird, but again, it's kind of all I'm used to. So like, how is education different in terms of the assessment in your practicum in Nova Scotia?
So in Nova Scotia, it was based on IBL, like inquiry-based learning. Yeah. So it was there wasn't much focus on, okay, they need to understand the ideology of fascism. It was more of, okay, how can you bring your ideologies into the world when you become a global citizen? And what does your ideology look like?
Well, it's kind of reframing it.
Yeah.
It's a similar kind of letting them figure out what their ideology is rather than telling them what one is.
Exactly. So my understanding of Alberta education, social studies, it's looking at past events and ideologies and trying to form your understanding of how society works today.
Yeah.
Versus in what I did in Nova Scotia was understanding your own ideology, understanding what's around you, and how are you going to bring your ideology into the world as a citizen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like so it's I don't think either is wrong. It's just a different way of going about things.
It's just a different approach of like how you go into the day almost, because you're almost thinking, what do I teach them versus where do I guide them almost in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you want your obituary to say?
My obituary? I don't think I've ever thought about that. Lover of anime, lover of music. I think those two things, music and anime.
Okay. So why music? Because this has been like Shadow the DJ. That's kind of the trademark.
Yeah.
How does one get into DJing? Why did you like it? And what kind of keeps you doing it?
I don't think there's a guidebook that says, this is how you get into DJing.
No.
But my path was a little different. So music has always been the love of my life. Always. I just love music. The way it affects moods has been so interesting to me always. And listening to someone make lyrics and how different beats and the way the beat is used moves people. I've always just loved that.
Okay.
So that's me. That's always been me.
Yeah.
When I was at St. FX, I just happened to make friends with the resident DJ there.
Okay.
And one night we were watching an NBA game and he was like, yo, come try this.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you crazy? That looks so difficult. They're like glowing buttons everywhere. I don't understand.
Yeah, it seems extremely overwhelming. Like this, because I think people think like being a DJ would be easy until you're asked to control the aux at a party, and then everyone hates everything you do, and then you're
That's
like,
what I'm saying.
yeah.
A lot of times when you get requests as a DJ, people are like, play this, play that, play this. And I'm
It's
like,
no.
You
don't know what you want yet.
I'm not typing songs into Spotify.
Yeah.
It's not that simple. And if I play this song, I'm going to ruin everyone's vibe, including yours. You think you want this song, but you don't.
So how can you kind of pick up on what people want as you move through a night?
So as you move through the night, you first of all, you need to know the theme of the night. We kind of talked about this off air.
Yeah.
So let's say, for instance, I'm doing R2K night or 2K10 night, like a throwback. Like a throwback night.
Yeah.
You know, you're playing like your old Nelly, your Usher, you know what I mean? T-Pain.
Yeah.
And then you know these songs are the ones coming. And then someone asks you for a Taylor Swift song that came out a week ago. Yeah, we like Taylor Swift.
Yeah, nothing wrong with her.
A lot of people like Taylor Swift, but if I just randomly drop 22 in there,
that could be fun.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
But then most of the audience are like, okay, I'm on a vibe.
Well, they'll notice it.
Yeah, they'll notice the switch.
Yeah, because you almost don't want them to notice the music changing. Really, like am I kind of right? You want them to be like in the groove.
The goal is the reason why transitions need to be smooth is that people need to be on the same level. It's all about levels when it comes to DJing. You need to be on the same mood. Yeah. So if I'm doing So Sick by Neo, you know, it's more of a sweet, like slow melody. Yeah. But if then I go to Yeah by Usher, it's more upbeat.
So do you kind of like go through waves throughout the night? Yeah. Or is it kind of is there something like where you're rising and then kind of falling for a bit longer?
Yeah.
Like,
So DJs,
I know it's hard to say without actually being in like a club and like watching.
DJs have different methods. Like for me, I usually start high. Yeah. High tempo. Yeah. Because my methodology behind that, my thinking behind it is if you start high, your excitement level, your endorphins are released from the start of the night, from the get-go.
When you're getting people out there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of the goal. Get the night started.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
So even if you switch to a lower tempo, the emotion has already been released, so they want to stay for longer.
Okay. Yeah.
But not every DJ does that.
Yeah, that seems like the way I would try to do it too, because you don't want to start low, but you don't want to start too high. Yeah, where it's like everyone's now waiting for that to happen again, but you're kind of going in that groove. But
some DJs start high and then in the middle of it go low and then high and then low.
And so you did tell me about this, but what was the one time that you bombed? And not like bombed as a DJ, but you said there was a time when your computer gave out.
Yeah.
So explain to me the feeling that you get when 500 plus people are looking at you and you're having technical difficulties with your computer.
Sheer terror. Absolute terror. I wanted to curl up and roll into a ball, and I want to be anywhere else but there. Because imagine intoxicated people, right?
Yeah. They're not worried about what they're thinking or what they're saying.
500 intoxicated people, and you just cut the music off from them. They're not happy. Yeah. So I had to get on the mic real quick and at the same time, while fixing whatever the problem is, talk to them and say, hey, technical difficulties, but we'll be right back. Plug in my phone, play a random song, and then I fixed it in a minute and a half, 2 minutes, but it feels like 10 years.
Well, so I love that kind of thread, because when you say feelings of terror and reading the mood, that's like how I would describe my practicums. Okay. When you're trying to, obviously very different, and I know like I don't want to make this too.
Is it different though? Because as a DJ, you're catering to your audience, and so are you as a teacher.
Yeah, like you have an audience that you're trying to. It's very hard trying to entertain with a learning goal. That's very difficult, and especially when you are super nervous starting out. Like I remember the first lesson that I had to give, just like your heart's going like 140 beats per minute and you're just at rest and you are scrambling a little bit. Sometimes you get into the groove, but then you think it's going to be this like mind-blowing experience, and then it's extremely tame in teaching. So I would say when it came to DJing, especially when you got like the first, like what was your first time DJing like?
So my friend I mentioned earlier, He got some free labor, I should say, because
Yes.
what would happen was he, whenever he booked a gig,
Yeah.
his name was on the poster, but it was actually me.
Yes.
So that's how I got my practice.
Yeah.
So he'd just walk around the bar saying hi to people while I'm up there learning the trade kind of thing.
Yeah.
So my first time doing it, my heart was racing. Like, you're in front of 600 people and they're judging what you're doing every second of the night.
Yeah.
And it feels like everything is riding on your decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I set up checkpoints in my mind.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, get through this BPM set. BPM, beats per minute. So I said I started off fast. So get through my high pace songs. If I get through my high pace songs, this is what I'm going to transition to. Mm-hmm. Get through my mid pace songs.
Oh, okay. So what are you doing? Because it seems like you're always like 5-10 minutes ahead.
You have to
in your mind, right?
Yeah.
And so again, I'm actually kind of shocked how clearly I'm seeing the parallels here with teaching and DJing right now. Like it's a pretty similar mindset.
100%.
Is skill set the wrong word? I'd say mindset or like approach.
Both, actually.
Yeah. So and so I guess as you're moving through, you're trying to kind of read it. Mm-hmm. And what do you do at each checkpoint?
So I have to decide which song connects most with the last song I played.
Okay.
So it's very similar with teaching because for me to effectively bring in another topic, the last thing I spoke about in the last topic connects well with the first part of the next topic.
Yeah, they want us, like they almost want to be directed.
Their brain needs to connect to something, or they're gonna say, "Sir, why did you teach this in isolation? It makes no sense to me." But I show them, okay, these are how you connect the dots. Similar with transitioning in music. Uh-huh. So you go from "Please Don't Stop the Music" by Rihanna, mm-hmm. and then I go to "Body" by Luxury.
Yeah.
Because when she's like, "Please don't stop the music," and there's a pause, he starts his section. So it's like this zing in your brain. You don't notice that I do it. I notice it, but your brain will notice. You don't notice it.
Yeah.
So it almost gives you this another release of emotion.
What is that feeling? Why is that, like, have you ever looked into why that happens? Because I noticed running without music versus running with music is a completely different like experience in terms of like music actually gives you energy. Yeah. And that's weird.
Because from my experience, it releases something in you. I feel like there's I don't know the science behind it. I've maybe read a couple things, but I don't want to say I'm the knowledge on it, so don't quote me on it. But I feel like when you play certain music and it evokes certain emotion, it releases certain chemicals.
Well, it's like spiritual. It's like how it feels. Like, would you consider yourself like a spiritual person?
Yeah, I would say so.
Because I feel like I don't know if I am. It's like I act as if I am, because like there's some experience that are not denied. Like you can't deny that they happen, but I
feel like spiritual usually people connect it with like a deity or a religion. Yeah. But if you look at it from the sense of if you're a chemical person rather than a spiritual person, I feel like everyone with emotion, you feel a certain type of way when something happens because something is released inside of you.
Well, it's like a feeling of connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So why anime?
Why anime?
Yeah.
Why not anime? I don't know why. I don't know why everyone doesn't watch anime.
Because like I have a few friends who are just like anime is everything, and like I've watched it a few times, and I just don't see it. I don't know. Like it's just not my realm. So like, what is it that like sticks to you? Is it like a messaging? Is it like the way it's kind of
if you don't
phrased?
know what to look for, you won't see it. You will never see it.
So what do you look for?
So let me explain. Okay. So let's first of all tell your audience that anime is not cartoons.
No. And I've always thought that anime is a lot more layered than people are giving it credit for who don't watch it.
Because they're based on Japanese novels. They're not just randomly generated stories. They're based on Japanese novels, and they have beginning, middle, end, climax, suspense,
Yeah.
I always tell people there's an anime for everyone.
Okay.
There are many different genres.
Yeah.
Romance, action, shonen, meaning like heroes with powers.
Okay.
There are many different types.
Yeah. Well, it's always like archetypes and like your classic stories, but yeah.
Yeah. So whenever I introduce someone to anime, I need to understand them and what they like.
Okay.
So for example,
so how would you
what do you like? What are your most enjoyable hobbies? I think you like to walk, right?
Yeah, I like to walk. But
Yeah.
I guess when it comes to what I watch on TV, I know it sounds super unoriginal, but like World War I, World War II movies are just like I think it's the militant romanticism of them. It's like the two kind of extremes. It's
I
like
already
literally
know
death
the
and
perfect
love,
anime for you.
right? Yeah, okay.
Just from you saying that, I
Okay.
know the perfect anime for you to watch.
What is it?
Attack on Titan.
Attack on Titan. Okay, I feel like I've heard that.
It's a good anime.
Yeah.
Here's why you'd love it.
Okay.
Because it's military centric.
Okay.
Has a lot of differing ideologies in there.
Okay.
A social hierarchy.
Yeah.
History hidden and revealed.
What do you mean by hidden and revealed history?
So, the premise of the anime is that human society is now the entirety of human society is living within the confines of a wall, and all the history of the society is controlled by the people in power.
Sounds like Eurocentrism at play.
Do they know how accurate this history is? Even though their entire lives are based on this history, you learn more while watching it. Yeah.
So, do you think there's a way to like connect anime to some of like the social studies content that we've looked at?
100%.
So, like what?
They're Attack on Titan, for example, understandings of nationalism when it comes to your identity within your nation.
Yeah.
That comes on later in the series, but it's important.
Yeah.
The understanding of social hierarchy, the roles you play, based on your occupation, how much money you have.
Yeah. Well, it's like you behave according to a certain label that's given to you.
Exactly.
Which is strange anyway. But yeah.
Globalization. Yeah. Also later on in the series where they discover, hey, we're not the only ones here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And
cool.
then other people's identities come into play with their own.
All right. How long is like an anime series? Like how long is Attack on Titan?
It's about, I think there are 4 seasons now, but they've split up the 4th season quite a bit.
Okay.
But it depends on anime. Usually animes that aren't super popular usually have 1 season with 12 episodes. But then you could have super popular ones.
Wait,
like
I
One
almost
Piece.
feel like the more that we were talking about, the label of anime is kind of silly to just have like one label on it. Like, is it? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, am I wrong in saying that?
What do you mean?
I guess like people say, "Oh, I watch anime." It's kind of generalizing it as being one thing.
That is true.
Yeah, whereas
because there's so many different types.
Yeah, like whereas if you go through Netflix, like you're not saying, "Oh, I'm watching Netflix." It's like I'm watching comedies or romance. You know what I mean? Like I feel like anime is kind of given that Netflix label as like it's only one thing.
Yeah.
And it comes across, I think, if you don't watch it as like being cheesy because of that generalization, I think.
Because Pokemon is worlds different from Attack on Titan.
And so, and like when I picture anime in my mind, that's what I kind of go back to. But I think people, but again, the number one thing that gains traction in my classroom is the oversimplifieds. So like people love the kind of animated overview of what's of the stories you're trying to tell. Because every lesson that we're teaching, you're trying to kind of cliche speaking, kind of give them the underlying narrative that kind of connects everything together and the commonalities and the patterns. So why does it need to be through this like boring World War II documentary? Why can't it be through Attack on Titan? Right.
That is interesting perspective. I think the problems with that is the negative connotation that comes with teaching with an animated system. It almost feels like you're taking it not seriously.
So do you feel like that?
I don't, because of how impactful anime has been to me. I understand the the severity and the seriousness
Yes.
of some of the concepts that come through anime.
And I think that's part of the purpose of educating is trying to, like, I can watch anime on my own or watch Attack on Titan on my own, but watching it with you, I'm going to see it very differently.
Yeah, 100%.
And well, reframing a lens is kind of exactly what you're trying to do with your classroom about everything all the time anyway.
Mhm.
So I don't see why you can't use different tools for that if you want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know, it's kind of, when we've been discussing, it's like DJing and anime always kind of come up as like two main interests of yours. And I'm just wondering,
Mhm.
like, how do you channel interest into the job? Because I almost find people who stop being creative are the ones who start becoming miserable in the job.
I see.
Yeah.
So with that, I think I use a lot of the strategies I use while DJing while I'm teaching. I survey the crowd. I'm using asterisks in the air right now, saying I'm looking at my classroom. What's the mood of the class while I'm saying this concept? Because if they're looking at me with glass eyes, they don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah. So how do you teach? Is that a too open-ended question? Because I guess, like, what is your, because I'm still very much lecture at the front of the room, show videos, take notes, break them down. I'm getting into a bit more where, because we are kind of in that standardized kind of structure, I'll actually write out like position paper prompts on the board, and then I'll connect case studies to them as we're learning them. But my whole process is kind of built into teaching to the test.
I see.
Right? So how did you come into teaching? Like, what do you do in your classroom?
So,
and I don't mean for that to sound like an interview question or
no,
anything, but
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So how I teach is currently changing every day. And I know that sounds like a cliche thing to say, but coming in, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but because the Alberta education system is different, I kind of had to combine these two people together.
Yeah. So what do you mean by two people?
So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So my whole thing coming to teaching, I'm gonna do project-based learning, choir-based learning, open-ended questions. But those don't necessarily teach them how to answer questions that have a yes or no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. So I've almost had to combine, have them understand critical and open-ended thinking while also understanding how to read a question. So I'm currently doing that. I'm getting better at it. So I started with projects.
Okay. What kind of projects? Coming into the Alberta one, you make the adaptation of, I'm in a more standardized curriculum. I have certain expectations of how students are supposed to perform on certain tests.
Yeah.
What kind of projects do you find have like helped build the learning in your room? What were the first ones that came to mind? Like, this would apply, if you don't mind. Because like, even I'm right now, because I'm really trying to hone the skills for the source analysis by doing some sort of more open-ended work. So the two main ones for 20, which we are both teaching right now, is the first one I did that flag assignment, where it's like, I want you to recreate the Canadian flag. Yeah. Where like, use the symbols, use the background, create something new. But then I said, I want your written response to this to be like you created your own source. So that way they're kind of doing the source analysis write up, but they still get the ability to be creative and kind of choosing what they get to write about. Yes. And I've done the same thing with their propaganda assignment. So I'm kind of, but again, that's kind of just the same idea applied twice. Like, I'm still very stuck in terms of how do I move beyond, like, how do I move slightly outside the zone without getting out of the zone entirely? Yeah.
So what I see you doing is the first step. It's not an incorrect step, so to speak.
Like, it doesn't feel like inquiry,
because anything outside of what's standardized, it's whatever level you create. Because everything outside of the box is now all you. Yeah. So what I've done something similar where I've had them do a propaganda project. Yeah. But instead of looking at different propaganda posters or sources, I've shown them the elements that make propaganda effective. Yes. Show them the ones that make it ineffective, and have them make their own propaganda poster. So you've done something similar.
Yeah.
But I am in my own understanding, because everything you do in teaching is based on your student experience.
Yeah.
How you learn.
Mm-hmm.
It might not benefit everyone, but it's the best way you can relay your message.
Yeah.
So it's the most beneficial through your teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So how I learned things was to understand it within my own understanding. So that's my idea of, okay, let them make their own propaganda and then let them see if, okay, do you think this is an effective propaganda tool?
So what did you do something similar where they kind of created their own poster or whatever, some sort of propaganda, or how did they do it?
So my projects are done in parts. So the first part is understanding and information. So they get, using the Alberta education system, I get them to understand the past and what information is already there.
Yeah.
And then the second part is making their own article, their own source. And I did gave them blank pieces of paper and they drew their own propaganda.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so they made their own poster.
Well, because I like that you give them the information, you don't tell them the information.
Yeah.
I like that. And they can kind of adapt it their own way.
Yeah. Because I feel like if you write down the information and you find it yourself, you're more likely to remember it rather than me just saying it at the front of class one day.
And so you grew up in Jamaica, correct?
Yes.
And how old were you when you moved to Canada?
I was 18.
Okay, so you pretty much do all of your education growing up in Jamaica. How different was the education in Jamaica versus Canada?
Worlds different.
Okay,
it's so different. I found that in Jamaica, there's almost an expectation that, okay, this is your teacher, you must listen to every word your teacher is saying, and you must respect your teacher.
Okay,
and that's just the understanding.
Okay.
Whereas here, it's more of, okay, we're going to question our teacher
at
all points.
So what do you think do you think there's a better one? Like, what do you think was, because I almost think it's strange to teach your students to never question authority. Yeah. But I was going to
ask you which one was better for whom, because the one in Jamaica definitely was better for the teacher, but was it better for the critical understanding of the students?
Yeah, because I kind of always say to my students, like, put me on blast. Like, if you think I'm saying something that's, like, inaccurate, like, I am the first one, and I think you kind of should have the attitude of, I'm the first one that's willing to be wrong here. And I've actually started kind of reframing things from, I won't necessarily, because a lot of what we do is talking at them versus with them. I always try to talk with them instead of at them. So instead of being like, this is what happened during the Great Depression, it's like, we're going to look at the Great Depression. What are you guys seeing here? Yeah. That's kind of how I've tried to make my class more conversational, because I've noticed the exact time that when you start to talk at them, you see the eyes. The glaze over. Yeah. And they just, like, they need learning to be informal. Yes. It's kind of what I'm picking up on for it to be effective. Now, you can still stand up every day and talk for 90 minutes a block, but that doesn't, and you might look like you're working and being effective.
Well, you're not in reality.
But in terms of how you're actually translating yourself into their brains and filling it with, like, strategy is probably the wrong word, but the capacity for understanding. Yeah. I wouldn't say that's necessarily the best way to do it.
You have to put in your mind that our generation and their generation, it's social media. They get their information 10 seconds. Yeah. And every 10 seconds, it's new things. So standing there for 90 minutes, I wouldn't be able to learn like that. I struggled with professors that did that.
See, I loved it. I could listen to my...
Again, not everyone learns the same way. But
no, and that's been my. I've always had, like, the huge, like, imposter syndrome, and my big thing was, that's how I learned something, so I almost feel like I need to relay it back the way I learned.
No, you should. I agree with that. Okay, I think that if Mr. Clark changes himself too much and tries to, let's say, be Miss Morgan. it won't.
Yeah.
It will come off as not real. It won't hit the same way because you enjoy someone speaking to you. You do it in a way that's enjoyable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like you might become better at the speaking component if that's like your main method.
Yeah, because there were some professors that spoke the entire time, didn't take any questions and just spoke. Yeah. But it was enjoyable to listen to them and hear their understanding, see their train of thought, because you could tell they're passionate about what they do, and it was intriguing. You know,
that's fair. Like I guess maybe spicing up the intrigue, because I'll usually kind of toss questions out, and I kind of create my own rabbit holes like as I'm going. So I think when there's a difference between lecturing and engaging in like personal dialogue with yourself.
Yeah,
I think that has been something where I start to see, and I think admitting you don't know something actually lends a lot of credibility to your students, because they'll see, oh, he's actually trying to figure this out with us, not necessarily. And now, are some days better than other? Yes. Yeah. Just some days where I'm like, I'm just going to get through 30 minutes of content and then I'm going to sit back down and let them work because I'm exhausted. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think that's the overall goal so far. So
for me, the two cornerstones of my teaching philosophy or pedagogy.
Yeah. So actually I wrote down on here, what does the word pedagogy mean to you?
It just means a word that's been used so many times in the education program, but it in actuality, it's just my understanding of how I instruct. It's the philosophy of my teaching.
Yeah. And so I think the simplest and I think most effective explanation of pedagogy, because like I heard it for years, just kind of in one ear at the other. It's what you have the students do with the information you give them. So I think that was actually the most like, oh, it's actually like the art of how you lead them to assessment. That's kind of like how I imagine pedagogy. So if it is that way, I've almost thought that any sort of like teacher comparison and evaluation is kind of obsolete. Do you agree with that? I'm just gonna throw like
I do agree with it because there's this thing in education where we try to move away from bias, right?
Yes.
But that's impossible.
Yeah.
Everyone that lives on planet Earth is biased based on their lived experience and what they've been taught while growing up.
Yeah.
You can't get rid of bias.
No.
Not completely anyways. Yeah. So how you see the world and how you see content in order to get that across to students, I'm not going to see it that way. It's impossible for me to see it completely through your eyes.
Yeah. And there's so many like contradictory. So I guess when it comes to the teacher comparison thing, my mind was I had a vision in my head of what a teacher looked like. And I'm going to do everything I can to fit that kind of traditional mold. But it's a fool's errand.
No, you'll just be running after a unicorn.
So have you struggled with that at all in terms of like comparing yourself? Like there's certain things you kind of like the way your school does things and the way your district does things. Like you kind of learn how to do the administrative stuff the way that it's kind of it wants to be. But in terms of like I used to get just extremely stressed and like extreme like borderline depressed. Yeah. Because I would get to the point of like, I'm not good enough as a teacher.
I understand.
But like you can't, but going into it as I want to be like that teacher doesn't really make sense.
No.
The more we do it.
That's what causes your stress. And I've never been stressed with that. And here's why. So this is gonna get a little, that's okay. A little deep. But I had a stress similar to that early on in my educational experience. So when I moved to Canada. So when I moved to Canada, my first year in university, that was a huge struggle for me. Because moving to Canada, a lot of people won't have this experience, but a lot of people will as well. It was the first time that I noticed that I was different in terms of being Black. Because Jamaica is a predominantly Black country. So it was the first time it was highlighted. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I was just
Yeah.
in Jamaica. I was just like a smart kid and
Yeah.
athletic kid. I was just liked by most people,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just living life, being who I am,
Yeah.
a Jamaican.
Yeah.
You have different races in Jamaica. Everyone's
Mhm.
just Jamaican. It's not really highlighted
Okay.
that they're different because they look different.
Mm-hmm.
But when I moved to Canada, it was, instead of, oh, it's the smart kid, it's the black smart kid. And that, it may seem minor, but it's like there's an added layer to my identity that I didn't have to deal with for most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that put a strain on my education, social life. It was I almost dropped out of university.
So is it, how did the perception of yourself change? Because it seems like, at what point did you feel that people were placing that label on you?
So they've now put a term to it, but I didn't know the term at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the microaggressions. So it was
Okay.
almost the expectation that I was not good as the rest, and that puts a weight on you. So whenever you answer a question in class and your professor is like, "Oh wow, that was articulate," it's like almost like, "Oh, I can't believe
Wow.
that you answered that question." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's when you go into the supermarket, people look at you, just feel
Like you feel
like an imposter in
Whoa.
someone else's
Well,
space.
like, okay, interesting.
Like you could see you can see the fear sometimes.
Okay. Like
just for being there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a whole day. It was like I moved to another universe.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, that's actually really fascinating, because one of the things, again, I don't have that experience. And so when it comes to, like, I was teaching about like Jamaica becoming a republic recently.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was talking about, like, I know that you told me you were from Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking, like, I'm very much into trying to be as authentic as I can.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was teaching about that kind of Jamaican, the case study of Jamaica, it was, this could be delivered so much better by someone who's actually has intimate experience with it, in terms of like interacting with the colonial legacy.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than just me being person in the front of your room saying, "Oh, this is just another example of decolonization." Right.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
And so how did you kind of maintain your authenticity, and how did you learn to kind of not get over it, but kind of learn to live with it, but still continue on the path that you were on?
Yeah. So bringing it back to your scenario and how you felt that stress as a teacher, it was similar to the stresses I felt, almost like an imposter in Canada. What was my identity within Canada? And this comes down to the reason why I became a teacher. So there was this professor at St. FX, Dr. Ronald Charles. He is a gentleman from Haiti, and he went through similar experiences. And I was in one of his religion classes, and he recognized that I was struggling, and he kind of took me under his wing and said, "Come on, you are brilliant, you are smart." And him doing that saved my educational career. I would have not been able to finish university if it wasn't for that intervention. And the way he delivered his classes, that's how I emulate my teaching as well.
Yeah.
So he taught about the Bible and the Gospels, but he did it from a historical perspective, using discussion in class, critical questions, saying, okay, this is the popular view, but let's actually discuss the not so popular view and see what that's like. And because we discussed the devil's advocate perspective often, it allowed me to understand the popular view more.
Yeah.
In that sense. And that's how I went about things. And because he was so different from every single other professor I've had, I've kind of emulated that teaching. And then with the struggle of moving to Canada, it forced me, yes, it was a bad situation, but it forced me to really understand my identity within a different sociological sphere.
Okay.
You
Like
know
you
what I
kind of
mean?
reframed the way you perceived your identity in the new context.
Yes.
Okay.
So to be able to feel comfortable in another space,
Mm-hmm.
I had to be comfortable within myself as much as possible. And that allowed me to be, so wherever I go,
Mm-hmm.
even if it is a new space, around me is this own space I've created, and I'm myself within that space, and that space just happens to be within a new place.
Okay.
So I never feel like an imposter because I'm always, wherever I go, within my space.
Well, it almost seems like you had to newly craft your self-esteem.
Yes.
Would that be accurate? Of like you needed to, yeah, 'cause I wouldn't even know how to remotely relate to being put in a situation like that. But do you
Coming
think
into a
that?
new job, it's like,
Yeah.
when I moved to Canada, I had this perception of other people and myself, but
Okay.
in order to survive and to thrive, I had to throw out that canvas and rebuild a canvas that can no longer be affected by
Other
outside
people. Okay.
perceptions.
Okay.
Because when you are the only perception that matters, it makes it hard for your identity to be molded by others.
Hey everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. Just wanted to say again, if there are any issues with professional conduct and or you would like to share your own story, experience, or have something you would like to contribute to the show, please do not hesitate to reach out at lucasrdclark97@gmail.com or send a direct message on Instagram to @MrClarkAfterDark. Hope you all enjoyed, potentially found something of use, and of course, please do not forget to subscribe. See you guys all next time. Unless you're scared.